Okay, Shalom Yasharala, we are back for the second half of the Sabbath service. We're now going to go through First Maccabees chapter 16 now, after we finished First Maccabees 15, and seeing how we now have another conflict again, even after they proclaimed peace, yet now they're going back on their word. Just to begin, you don't have to link this with anything, but this is something that we see that the heathen are known for doing. Esau notwithstanding, we have the warning in Psalms 55. Psalms 55, verses 20. I'll read 19 down to 21. Like I said, this doesn't link with anything, but you can just write down Psalms 55, 19 to 21. Which Psalms 55 and 19, you can just write it down. It reads, power or God shall hear and afflict them, even he that abideth of old, Salah, because they have no changes, therefore they fear not God, right? So they don't have any changing or, I guess you could say, remorse for wrongdoing, right? They stay that course, that wicked course. Because if they understood, they would change. They would make the change for the better. It says in verse 20, he hath put forth his hands against such a be at peace with him. He had broken his covenant, right? So this wicked man, it says, he had put forth his hands against such a be at peace with him, right? But that's what he was trying to do, Antiochus, right? Trying to bring or establish peace again, right? With these covenants and agreements, saying you're going to go back to letting you coin your own money, and any debt that you owe the king, we're going to release them. But then he got funny style and then broke his covenant. He said, yeah, you know what? I changed my mind. I want what's not mine. I want what's yours. You're going to give it to me, right? So once they get a bit of wealth and power and get themselves established, get those agreements, and they abuse the power that they have. We have to make sure we don't fall into this category ourselves, right? Because we did this to each other at one point when we had authority. And as a punishment, the Most High had the nations take us out. So now we see other nations do the same thing. We have to look upon that and go, yeah, we did that at one point, right? To a certain extent. Let's make sure when we get the reins of rule again, we don't abuse the power once we have it, right? And blessed be the Most High, because this is the last captivity. We won't have to worry about that in the kingdom, because we'll be perfect in the kingdom where we won't be able to sin, right? So no more funny business like this. So it says, he had put forth his hands against such a be at peace with him. He had broken his covenants. 21. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. Right? So you get those smooth words. Okay, take heed to them, hold them to them. Right? Hold them to those words that they give you, but at the same time, just keep an eye out when it comes to these heathen, because once opportunity arises, they oftentimes, not all the time, but they'll oftentimes go back on their word. They'll switch things up. Just be ready if and when it happens. That's all. And then just still remind them of the agreement that they held, because now they go back on their word, the judgment's on them. As long as you don't get out of pocket and want to take matters into your own hands, when they break their covenant, you still keep it righteous in the commandments. That's going to be a judgment that falls upon their head for going against the covenant of the Most High. But now we have a conflict arisen again. Let's see how Simon's going to handle this new enemy, these new enemies with that same dynasty. Sendebeus, right? His new general, or his new guy that's trying to war against Judea now. Backwards before he said, you can have Judea. Any of the lands that we took. Let's see what comes of this. So first Maccabees 16:1, it says, make him up John from Gazara and told Simon his father what Sendabeus had done. Right. So John was Simon's son. Right. He was the continuation of. Remember, they were all known as the Hasmoneans, the Hasmonean dynasty, the sons of Mattathias. You'll see this John also, I think, referred to as John Hyrcanus, who was the son of Simon Thasai, son of Mattathias. So he's a young man at this point. It says, then came up John from Gazara and told Simon his father what Sendabeus had done. Wherefore Simon called his two eldest sons, Judas and John, and said unto them, right? So he had a son named Judas. Obviously, he named after his brother, right? Or that his son could say, yeah, I named after my uncle, right? Judas Maccabeus. And said unto them, I and my brethren in my father's house have ever from our youth unto this day fought against the enemies of Israel, and things have prospered so well in our hands. We deliver Israel oftentimes, right? Just going into the history we read in the Maccabees, right? About him and his brothers dealing with the heathen, right? Dealing with the Greeks, you know, coming one way and then saying one thing and doing something else. Or just coming at us, you know, full force with warfare and us resisting and being successful. Verse 3, but now I am old, and ye, by God's mercy, are of a sufficient age. So now you can see that he's handing down the reins, right, to the next generation. So first we had Mattathias handing it down to Simon and his brothers when they were young. Now some time has gone by, and Simon's getting older in years, right? Now he's going to hand it down to his sons, Judas and John. So he says in verse 3, but now I am old, and ye by God's mercy are of a sufficient age. Be ye instead of me and my brother, talking about Judas, and go and fight for our nation, and the help from heaven be with you, right? So keep it going, right? Keep the fighting going. Because clearly with this new generation, we got issues with them now. But since I'm old, I'm going to need you, my sons, take all the advice, the counsel I've given you, look at our example, and continue on that tradition, right? So it's like the legacy, right? Not only what we've accomplished, but how we did it. We did it through our trust in the Lord. We did it through upholding the Heavenly Father's righteous principles, the law, statutes, and commandments. To link with 16:3, you can link in the Psalms. I think we just read this. I think Kambakwai just read this in one of the Sabbath services. Not the Sabbath service, but I think it was in a class. About children being an inheritance of the Lord and how they're a blessing as far as the role that they serve. You know, even though that they start off young, and depending on you, when you instill in them the right principles and values and nourish them, right, in all ways, physically, mentally, spiritually, they can serve this for you now. So this is in the Psalms. Sorry, one second. Psalms 127. Psalms 127, you write down 3 to 5. Psalms 127, 3 to 5. And Brother Davis, you can read that, Baba Kushan. Psalms 127, verse 3, and we'll read down to 5. This linking with the First Maccabees 16:3. And read down to 5.
Lo children are the heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward.
Right. So it says children are an heritage of Yahweh, right? So beyond the land itself, the children themselves, right? You know, the people are the true heritage, right? Because what good is it you have in land and don't have anybody to hand it to, right? So it says children are an heritage of Yahweh, and the fruit of the womb is his reward, right? You know. Read verse 4.
Arrows are in the hands of mighty men, so are the children of the youth.
Right, so comparing it to arrows in the hand of a mighty man, right? So mighty man with a bow, right? He's got arrows, and what? He shoots those arrows at different targets, right? So it says the same way that arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, it says so are the children of the youth, right? So another purpose that the children serve not only as a heritage, but they're considered like weapons, right? When you're still in them sound values now, they become a weapon unto you and to your house, to your family, right? That next generation that comes up. Because now, if you train them up in the way they should go, now they have the Most High as their force, as their power. Now you have that much more power, right? Through them. As they're going to defend you and defend those like you, defend your community, defend your nation, as you did when you were a child of your parents. So are the children of the youth, read verse 5.
Happy is the man that haveth his quiver full of them.
Right, so you know what a quiver is, right? Quiver is like it's like a, kind of like a satchel, but like a case you keep arrows in. You ever see like in the Middle Ages when they had bow and arrow where they had like like a sack or like a case. They put the arrows in, they pull them out. That's what a quiver is. So it's a container used to hold arrows. So as happy as the man to have his quiver full of them, right? And now remember, this isn't just having kids for kids' sake, because remember the scriptures also tell you that what? You know, better is righteousness with no children than many children but with wickedness. Right? Because now those children don't even have value because they're not following the Most High, which makes them invaluable. I mean, not invaluable, but doesn't give them value. They're not following righteousness. And it goes for anybody. So it's not just, oh yeah, I have all these kids, but now you have to teach the kids the right way. In the context here, that's what we're talking about. It says, happy is the man that have his quiver full of them. Read on.
They shall be ashamed, but they shall not be ashamed.
There you go.
But they shall speak with enemies in the gate.
It says, they shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate, right? Or in the border of the city, if they try to invade, right? So they shall not be ashamed. We shall speak with the enemies in the gate. So that's what we want, right? We want to marry, have kids, right? Teach them the right way so the nation can grow, right? We want to have more man and woman power, right? That's how we build up the nation. But not just to have, like I said, not just to have kids for kids' sake, but now to instill in them right values that what we may have more servants of the Lord. Because we're all supposed to be his children in the end, right? So that's what's key, to teach them the right way. And, we say that very loosely, in the community, we say, yeah, you got to teach them well, let them lead the way, right? That song. But now what does that mean? We got to teach them the law, statutes, and commandments, right? Right. That's the real greatest love of all, right? that's the lyrics, right, from that song. So the children are our future. So let's make sure we do right by them. If we know better, we should make sure they at least they got to know who they are. Why, as a people, we're in a lower state, and how to break that cycle of destruction and violence, right? To instill in them righteous values of who they are, righteous pride in that, and uphold the charge of the law, statutes, and commandments, because we got nothing else better to do. And how that'll solve all of our problems that we have. We just do that as a foundation. Yeah, I saw a hand up back there.
Yeah, what do they mean by they shall not be ashamed?
Right, meaning they should not be ashamed, meaning they're not going to be dealing with wickedness.
Okay.
Like the shame that comes from, or the reproach that comes from sin.
Okay.
Right, so they'll be, when they come of age, they can be ones to deal with your enemies going forward. Just like how your enemies, they'll make war with you, and you may be old, and they say, yeah, now we got them. It's like, yeah, guess what? Now I got these other youngsters now. I got a family now, and they're all in the same mind state as me. And they got more of a problem, right? That's why when it comes to war with the people or taking people captive, we look at what we experience here in captivity. Esau knew that. He knew that very well. That's why he said, yeah, when they have kids, we got to make sure that we teach the boys or train them up to be afraid of us, right? To be physically strong but then mentally weak. I'm sorry, yeah, physically strong but mentally weak, right? To even effeminize them, right? Like we see what happened with slavery, oftentimes, and then how it's even trickled down to today with the way the police system works, the way policing works when it comes to our kids, right? Because he said, yeah, we want them to be strong to serve our purpose. We don't want them having, being mentally strong to be able to put things together or to figure things out on their own. We want to keep them dependent. And in the end, once they serve their purpose, it serves our purpose to just eliminate them altogether, or come up with ways so that they can eliminate themselves, right? And they teach the daughters to be mentally strong to where what? They won't look to their men for protection because we'll do right in front of them. We'll make sure to emasculate him and to take his power and to make an example of him, right? It tells you that in the curse, you shall take a wife, another man shall lie with her, right? In slavery times, they would have that thing that they would do where they would say, they would come to the log cabin and tell the husband or the man, get out, boy, and have his way with that brother's wife while he's forced to stand outside. The only thing he could do is what? Try to fight mass and him being hung or killed, right? Or let it happen and then deal with that shame going forward, right? Well, your wife now, she can't look at you the same because it's like she's looking at you like, look what he did to me. You didn't do anything. Imagine being in that generation. You knew it was either that or I got to kill Madison and probably maybe even get my whole family killed if I had one. Those are some heavy options to make, right?
Yeah. That movie, The Butler, that was something. Did you see that?
Mm-mm.
That the Morgan.
It's got yeah. You don't have to say. I'll watch it, but we could talk about it. But do I really care enough about plot details? It seemed like that year it was like that and The Help. I saw both of those ads. I was just like, oh god, they going back to that again. Like they got to push this image of us. It's always this whole subservient role they got to push him to move and say,
I
see,
didn't
look,
see The Help, so I gotta check that out.
he did such a great job, and give him the Academy Award, right? But it's always for that kind of role, So he goes Esau again. Like they gotta put money behind those types of films that showing us in a less commonly light.
It's a reason it worked out. It's a reason.
Oh yeah,
They intended to.
absolutely. But it all ties back to what we're talking about here as far as the scriptures showing how what children are meant to be a weapon against the enemy, but now what the heathen do when they take us in captivity, they say we want to make their children a weapon for us against them. Keep their family divided, not together. That serves our purpose. Also, you can link this verse with Ecclesiasticus chapter 30, along the same lines as Psalms 127, 3-5. Ecclesiasticus chapter 30. We'll read from 1 down to 6. in a Gabar, if you could read that, Baba Kushab, I would appreciate it. And then we'll continue on in First Maccabees. So Ecclesiasticus chapter 30, verse 1 to 6.
All right. Ecclesiastes chapter 30, verses 1 to 6.
1 second. Make sure Brother Davis has it. It's in the Apocrypha. Ecclesiasticus, not Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes chapter 30, verses 1 to 6. Right.
Make sure we all have it. Good.
All right. He that loveth his son causes him often to feel the ride, that he may have joy of him in the end.
Right. He that loveth his son cause him oft to feel the rod, right? The rod of correction. Right? Test that behind, right? Or that back. If he gets out of line, right? Says something he shouldn't say, does something he shouldn't do. Right? And this isn't going into what they'll go to an extreme in this society and say, oh, that's child abuse. But no, it's just correction. And you always explain the reason why you're doing it to the child. It's not just, oh, I had a bad day at work, or I got the wrong side of bed, or I had a couple drinks. Let me just go to town on you. It's like, we're not talking about that. Talking about, okay, when it comes to being respectful, having certain responsibilities, acting a certain way, dressing a certain way, right? You don't go to the ride right away. No, you use words. You explain to your children, right? They're learning how to speak. You're teaching them how to speak. So deal with them, first with words. Explain things to them. Give them warnings. When those things aren't, taken heed to, that's where the rod comes in, because the rod is actually going easy. Because in this society, they don't get that rod when they're young. They'll get, police roughing them up later on, or they get thrown in prison, and then they'll be asking, they'll be saying, man, I wish my parents had told me this before. I wish my parents had beat me when I was young, when I was saying this, doing this. Now it's too late, right? That's why it says that he may have joy of him in the end.
He that chastises his son shall have joy in him, and shall rejoice of him among his acquaintances.
Keep going.
He that teaches his son grieveth the enemy, and before his friends he shall rejoice of him.
Check that out. He that teacheth his son grieveth the enemy, right? The other nations, right? They have families too. He grieveth the enemy. Why? As we read on, we're going to find out. But it says also, and before his friends he shall rejoice of him, right? So your friends are going to say, oh yeah, he's a good boy, right? Or she's a good girl, right? So well mannered, right? I feel proud to call them my own, right? I can entrust certain things, certain responsibilities unto them now, right? Because they know better, and because of that, they do better. Read on.
4. Though his father die, yet he is as though he were not dead. For he has left one behind him that is like himself.
See that? Though his father died, yet he is though he were not dead. Like when Mattathias passed on, he had his sons to carry on the righteous tradition. Now, as Simon's coming of age, he has his sons Judas and John to carry on that righteous tradition in his stead, right? It says he left one behind him that is like himself, sometimes more than one, right? The Most High blessing. If he had his quiver full. Read on.
5. While he lived, he saw and rejoiced in him, and when he died, he was not sorrowful.
Right. So when he lived and he saw and rejoiced in him, and when he died, he was not sorrowful. Why? Read on.
6. He left behind him an avenger against his enemies, and one that shall requite kindness to his friends.
Right. See that? He left behind him an avenger against his enemies. See that? That's what Judas and John are going to be to this new enemy that's arisen from the Greeks. Like we're reading about what Simon is saying. I'm getting old in years, but now, sons, hold it down as me and your uncles held it down. Right? Keep it going against them, and the Most High will defend you just like he defended us. You know, and their sons growing up, they saw some of this, right? Some of what the Most High did for them, for the nations. That's already in their minds. That's already going to motivate them. And as you know, raised up in the law, they got the forefathers before them to even look to. Just like Judas, he was always, when getting the men excited, he would always point back to our ancestors, the Most High fought for. He pointed back to Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, and how he delivered us from the Assyrians. Or you might point back to David, you know, and how the Most High delivered him from his enemies, or Joshua, or whoever else, right? As a means of, if he did that for them in Israel, he can do that for us now in Israel, because he made the promise to us and to our children forever. This promise is still handed down to us. We can still partake in it. We just have to trust in him and do the right thing. And here we are in 2017. It hasn't changed, right? As we're learning this truth, we now can call upon the Lord for things too. Call upon him for protection too, to help us out in time of need, right? When our backs are against the wall. And even when things are going well, we can still call upon him. You know, just send our appreciation, right? Like, we don't want to be in that mood where, you know, you're only calling somebody when you need something, right? You know how that feels if you're that person. So now, when it comes to the Most High, especially, we should do that where it's not just, okay, Most High need this, Most High need that. He wants you to do that, but then still call upon the Most High when he's giving you what you needed and what you want. Call upon the Most High and thank him. You know, do something for him, you know, build something, make something in his honor, right? To show your thanks and appreciation when things are going well. There, so that was Ecclesiastes 31:6. So let's continue on in 1 Maccabees 16. First Maccabees 16, verse 4 now. First Maccabees 16:4. It says, so he chose out of the country 20,000 men of war with horsemen, who went out against Sendabes and rested that night at Modin. Modin being that city where they were from, right? That they resided. It says in verse 5, and when as they rose in the morning and went into the plain, behold, both of footmen and horsemen came against them. Howbeit, there was a water brook betwixt or between them. So now the Greeks are coming with their hosts, but then they got theirs. And it says there was a water brook between them. It says in verse 6, so he and his people pitched over against them. When he saw the people were afraid to go over the water brook, he went first over himself, and then the men seeing him passed through after him. That done, he divided his men and set the horsemen in the midst of the footmen, for the enemy's horsemen were very many. Right? So we're outnumbered as usual, but are we really? Physically, we may be outnumbered, but now that's where our faith comes in, the trust that what the Most High is going to send is thousands of heaven to surround us. It's just one angel can kill out, can destroy hundreds of thousands of them. We just have to believe that he can. It tells you when going back to Hezekiah's time, remember Judas even mentioned Hezekiah to motivate the men at one point when we were in doubt, fight against the Greeks. It tells you in that history that you had the Assyrians, they surrounded the entire city of Jerusalem, right? We're going to destroy it. It says that when they encamped that night, because they had laid siege on the city, it says that 185,000 strong, the soldiers came down into the city, right? And the Assyrians, they were like a dominant empire back then, like how America is now. It says that they woke up dead. This one angel came down and slew them all in their sleep. An army of 185,000, all dead, except for their king. That was one angel did that. So, what does that tell you? It tells you the power of the Most High, right? And that's just a fraction. That's power to us on this level. But you see the example Hezekiah led. He had the people trust in the Lord. Even after the heathen came, the messengers came and said, listen, you guys don't want to trust in your God. Look how many we got. Who can beat us? We're Assyria. We're big bad Assyria. We got damn near 200,000 men out here ready to lay waste to this city. You got no shot. Just concede to our terms. Hezekiah sent word back saying, don't believe it. We are going to trust in the Lord. He's going to come through and deliver us because they come against us wrongfully. And we're doing the right thing. So, and he was rewarded for his faith, him and those that believed on him. So it says, I'll read 7 again. That none he divided his men and set the horsemen in the midst of the footmen. For the enemy's horsemen were very many. So picture in your mind's eye, you can picture those old battle formations. Usually you have your scouts go out first to spy out the land. And you have your your heavy infantry, and you have your light infantry, and you have your horsemen in between them right there. Usually like in the middle. And you'll have them surrounded by the infantry, both heavy and light infantry. Where heavy infantry, they can kind of take the brunt of arrows because they got heavy armor, but they have less mobility. They're usually in front of the light infantry, which won't have as heavy as armor. They can free form and they can move a bit more freely when it comes to attacking the enemy with sword and spear. And of course, you get the horsemen to that, which one horseman can do a lot more damage than just one mobile infantry. So they're kind of protecting the mobile infantry. So you get to use different tactics, especially if you have a smaller force, to protect that which is strong by that which is weak. So you can maximize your attack. So while we trust in the Lord in the end, of course, we still use physical strategy as far as using the terrain to our advantage, using whatever we can to our advantage, and then trusting the Lord if all that fails. So it's kind of a combination of using strategy tactics on a carnal level, but then trusting that the Most High, He take care of the rest after you've done everything you can do physically. So reading on, it says, okay, here we go, verse 8. Then sounded they with the holy trumpets, whereupon Sennacherib and his host were put to flight, so that many of them were slain, and the remnant get them to the stronghold. So we're already on a good track already. And just like we did before with Judas Maccabees sounding off with the trumpets, right? And just that alone, putting the fear in the hearts and minds of the enemy. Because many of them were slain, even though they had a larger force. So the remnant of them get them into a stronghold for protection. So they went there for defense to try to regroup. But now as you read on in verse 9, it says, at that time was Judas, John's brother, wounded. But John still followed after them until he came to Cedron, where Sennacherib had built. So now he followed after them and went back to this fort that they had set up called Cedron. But it says that Judas, John's brother, was wounded. So he's wounded, but he's still not out of the picture. He's still alive. But even with that, they still pressed on, still pressed forward, because of course the hope would be that he could be healed later, because you're going to get wounded in battle. It doesn't mean you'll always die per se. It says in verse 10, so they fled even unto the towers in the fields of Azotus. Wherefore he burned it with fire, so that there were slain of them about 2,000 men. Afterward he pursued into the land of Judea. Rather, afterward he returned into the land of Judea in peace. So it says they fled even to the fields of Azotus. And it says that he burned it with fire, that they had 2,000 men that were slain. So stay on the offensive, kept them regrouping, kept them trying to flee for protection, and it killed them still. So a good day for Israel here, a good day for Simon's sons, carrying on that righteous tradition of faith, leading back the enemy. It says in verse 11, moreover, in the plain of Jericho was Ptolemaeus, the son of Abubus, made captive. And he had abundance of silver and gold. So now this is all like in the southern region of Israel, going back and forth between Jerusalem, which was in the south, but more inland, versus these cities which were south, but towards the coast. Jericho is somewhere in the middle as well, right? Not too far from Jerusalem. Now, reading on, it says, this man Ptolemy, son of Abubus, said he had abundance of silver and gold. It says, for he was the high priest's son-in-law. Wherefore his heart being lifted up, he thought to get the country to himself, and thereupon consulted deceitfully against Simon and his sons to destroy them. So here we go again. Right? More sellouts for the cause, right? Those trying to take on power of their own. It's like every generation you get the righteous, the bold, the strong. You have those that, you know, are weak or conniving, right? And try to wheel and deal for their own position, as opposed to what the Most High is setting up. So it says, his heart be lifted up, he thought to get the country to himself, and thereupon consulted deceitfully against Simon and his sons to destroy them. Now Simon was visiting the cities that were in the country and taking care of the good ordering of them, at which time he came down himself to Jericho with his sons, Mattathias and Judas, in the 137th year, in the 11th month, called Sabbath. So going into Simon now, he has his young sons fighting the battles, but he's still going to these cities that knew him, you know, in his old age. He's still going to these different cities to make sure they had everything that was needful, right? He's not just giving up. He's still doing his part, making sure everything is secure before, you know, he finally has his end of years. Just as his father would. You know, we see here, he had another son, Mattathias, right? So we see he has his son John, of course, right? Who was a part of this battle we just read about against Sennacherib that was successful. He has a son Judas. He also has a son Mattathias. So you see he's named him after his brother and his father, right? So sometimes you'll see the same name used more than once, right? So we'll hand it down directly. Sometimes it may come down the second or third generation, a certain name, right? But clearly we can see his name choices and where they came from. It says in verse 15, where the son of Abubus received them deceitfully unto a little hole called Docus. So now we even see Ptolemaeus now doing his deceitfulness with them. It says he received them into a little hole called Docus, which he had built, made them a great banquet, howbeit he had hid men there. Right? So we'll see what he's got up his sleeve, how he's going to try to do against Simon's sons. So when Simon and his sons had drunk largely, Ptolemy and his men rose up and took their weapons and came upon Simon into the banqueting place and slew him and his two sons and certain of his servants. So, wow.
That was Israel doing it.
Yeah. So they took yeah, I believe so with this Ptolemaeus. It says his son-in-law. I wonder if he married one of his daughters. I'm thinking lawfully, of course, he wanted to marry another Israel. But I'm going to say yes, but maybe look at that a little closer. Maybe there's a stretch or a possibility he might have been a heathen. But from what I remember reading history about the Hasmoneans, it seemed like after John, his son John, was in power, from that point going forward, generation after, start to see them stop dealing with the Most High as much and sort of allow more Greek and Roman influence kind of come in. Even though they still kind of kept the commandments to a certain extent, they kind of went outside of certain things, and it wasn't the same as with that first and second generation of John. They kind of weaned off, and their organization, what they had set up from that time until Christ, that's what gave rise to what we call the Sanhedrin, which was pretty much the collection of the government of Judea, which was, you know, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and scribes. They were born out of this organization here that continued on after Simon and his sons that reigned. I think they had like a mother too, that she had chief power as well. There's a book I can bring if you guys are interested, but kind of goes into this history that's not so much detailed here, that takes place after this. Kind of goes into the transition between the Hasmonean dynasty into what will be known as the Sanhedrin, which was the ruling body of priests, the Pharisees, scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, and scribes that were the chief power in Judea during the time of Christ. Because remember, this they're doing their things around the hundreds or the 2nd century BC. It's just about a little over 100 to 200 years between that time to the time of Christ. So it's a relatively short time frame, you know. You look at the big scope of things, even though a lot happened in those years. So more than likely he married one of the daughters that Simon had, this man Ptolemy. Then Ptolemy, I'm back in verse 18. Verse Maccabees 16:18. Then Ptolemy wrote these things and sent to the king that he should send him an host to aid him, and he would deliver him the country and cities. So let me go above. Let me read 16 again. It says, First Maccabees 16:16. When Simon and his sons had drunk largely, Ptolemy and his men rose up and took their weapons and came upon Simon into the banqueting place, and slew him and his 2 sons and certain of his servants. Right, so caught them off guard. Said, okay, it was a banquet. You know, we're all family. You know, relax. But then took them when they were after they had drunken. Which, you know, even if you're not, you know, even if you're just nice, not wasted, it's hard for you to kind of keep your wits about you, right? So yeah, they caught them when their guard was down, and did this. Verse 17, in which doing he committed a great treachery and recompensed evil for good. Right? So unfortunately, this is how Simon meets his end, right? And his sons, Mattathias and Judas. Verse 18, then Ptolemy wrote these things and sent to the king that he should send him an host to aid him, and he would deliver him the country and cities. So now Ptolemy, being a sellout, going to the Greek king, saying, yeah, let me get some help here so that I can take this over for you, since we know that Antiochus had a change of heart already. So now he's on Antiochus' side to not uphold the righteous covenants that he made before, but to go against those covenants and to take over the land again. He sent others also to Gazara to kill John. Remember, his son John is still alive. Remember, he had the victory against Sendabeus, as you read earlier on in the chapter, and took over his city, Cedron, where he was at. It says, he sent others also to Gazara to kill John, and unto the tribunes he sent letters to come unto him, that he might give them silver and gold in reward. So even in righteousness, we know money is a motivator, even though it's not the chief motivator. Chief motivator for a righteous man is supposed to be what? The righteousness and the blessing of Yahweh above all, which the money comes with that, right? So yeah, he's got his men together in mercenary mode, saying, hey, you come fight for me, I'll reward you with these silver and gold and precious metals. And others he sent to take Jerusalem and the mountain of the temple. So now he sent them to take the capital city again. Now one had run afore to Gazara and told John that his father and brethren were slain. And quote he, Ptolemy, he sent to slay thee also. Right? So one was able to get, a messenger was able to come and get to John and let him know of the news. This is John Hyrcanus. When you look him up in history, gave him word of what happened, and the deception that Ptolemy, his brother-in-law, since he was Simon's son-in-law, had done to his father and brethren. Verse 22, whereof, when he heard, he was sore astonished. So you find out that your father and brothers are dead. It's gonna hit you pretty heavy, especially when you're rolling in righteousness, and you find out what the cause was, someone close to you doing it. It's gonna definitely hit you. So he laid hands on them that were come to destroy him, and slew them, for he knew that they sought to make him away. So those they had sent before him, you realize, oh, okay, they're here on behalf of Ptolemy, right? Let me take them out of the picture. And those that I'm warned against, I don't want them to be a problem with me. I want them to be a problem against a problem that I got to deal with later anyways. Let me slay them. As far as Sennabear, Cedron, and those that have followed him that were still around. Then it says in 23, as concerning the rest of the acts of John and his wars and worthy deeds which he did, and the building of the walls which he made and his doings, behold, these are written in the chronicles of his priesthood from the time he was made high priest after his father. So he will become the next high priest. You go into the history. Those books aren't, necessarily part of the scriptures, but there's history, that you can find. Like I said, I can show you guys a book that I have that kind of details some of the history that takes place after the Hasmonean dynasty, if you are interested. But we see that he would carry on that righteous tradition of his father afterwards. But sadly, we go into his sons and daughters that come after him to see a decline of that Israel trying to establish themselves. We see them more so building upon that alliance with the Romans, where they kind of have like let's just say a cooperative agreement with them. Like I said, this leads up to the founding of what will then become the Sanhedrin, or that governing body on the time of Christ, just a little over a century later. So here we come to an end of the first Maccabees and the history pertaining to Simon and his sons. We read Simon's end and his two of his sons' end, but then at least his son John still carried on that righteous tradition going forward, as we see here in the conclusion of verse 24. Yep, that's just how it works, It's like you're the head of a family or the head of an organization or a company or what have you. The idea is to groom someone or someone's, is going to have that same zeal, that same determination, carry on that same righteous tradition after you. But, to maintain that same level of zeal as each generation comes in, it can be a tough thing because, they're going to be their own men, their own women. And your hope is that they take the cause just as serious, but they may have their own ideas of what they want to do, right? They may have their own methods. That's cool, but they may even change principles that you agree with or that you founded. And then that could change everything. Once you change the principles behind the thing, your methods won't matter. If you say, okay, at first we're going to do things according to the Most High's law, now we're going to change those principles and, reshape it and create it in your own thing. Now it's going to be a different legacy. What were you about to say?
I'm saying, it's kind of, times I was agreeing with you when you were mentioning
Just speak loud so they can hear you.
Yeah, you think about the politics of America.
Mm-hmm.
America has people who come into office who could, in some cases, they continue on in the same path of the last administration, or they'll make a way to try to diminish the aspirations of the last administration and try to belittle it or change it.
Right. That's true. Because every ruler is his or her own person, and yet they have to make that choice once they have the reins. So we'll come to an end for today's reading in First Maccabees 15 and 16. So keep in mind for the next Sabbath service, so definitely begin to read for that. We're going to go back to the Old Testament. We're going through the different sacrificial laws. We're going to be reading, Leviticus chapters 7 and 8. Once again, Leviticus is chapters Leviticus chapter 7 and 8 is going to be our reading for next week. Make sure you get ready for that. Also, keep in mind, we know not this Monday coming up, but the Monday after that, we're going to be having the feast of dedication dealing with the same history of the Maccabees that we closed out on today, going into how it came about with that holy day and the battles leading up to it.
2 weeks on Monday.
One week from Monday. So once this Monday comes up, the following Monday, the 11th. So make sure if you work that you do personal time off, because the first and last day are going to be a Sabbath. So make sure not for next Tuesday, but the Tuesday following, which will be the 12th, and then the 19th, I believe, the following week, because the services are going to be Monday nights, Monday the 11th at sundown, and then the 19th, no, the 18th at sundown, which is a week later. So those Tuesdays that you are able to take those days off or keep them as Sabbaths if possible, right? And if you have to work, that you just try to refrain from buying and selling, and try to keep keep your mind on the Most High as much as possible. If you're not able to reserve those days off, as it stands, we're going to be having the service here in the school for both days, but that may change, and you'll know if that changes early next week. But the way it stands now, we're going to be having it here in the Philly school, the services for both the opening and the closing. Make sure you have those in your calendar, Monday the 11th, and then Monday the 18th of the following week. We're going to be observing the opening and the closing of the Feast of Dedication, or Hanukkah. And remember, yes, of December. And I'll read this verse. There's one verse you can always show folks when they say, oh, dedication, oh, ain't you keeping Christmas? You can say, well, look, our Lord and Savior kept the Feast of Dedication, so I want to do what Christ did, right? I'm not going to do something that he never told us to do, to celebrate his birthday. I don't know where you get that. So this is John chapter 10 and verse 22. Let's see what Christ did during the Feast of Dedication, or as you may hear it, as we say in the ancient Hebrew, Hanukkah, what the so-called Jews call Hanukkah, which just means dedication. That word in the Hebrew just means dedication. So this is John chapter 10. In verse 22, and it says, and it was at Jerusalem the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. So we're in the right season, a holy day, right? But then it says that they were keeping the Feast of Dedication. So you don't read about the Feast of Dedication in the first 5 books of Moses when it comes to our holy days. But you only read about the Feast of Dedication in the books of the Maccabees. So this is very like to use to show that the Apocrypha has to be a part of what we consider canon in the scriptures, because it's talking about something that's explained in the books of the Maccabees. They'll try to say, oh, the Maccabees, those books were added, later, and this, that, and the third. But no, actually, these books we can actually look to and say, yes, they're part of canonized scripture. So a verse you can use also to legitimize the Apocrypha, along with it just being a part of the original King James Version, which even the one I'm reading from today has the Apocrypha in it, right? And it, of course, has that history. Then it says in verse 23, and Jesus, or Yahushua, walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. So you see that even Yahushua was there in the temple, walking on the porch of Solomon, keeping that day with the rest of the Jews. So showing that we knew and we kept the feast of dedication during that time. So Maccabees isn't just some, made up story that doesn't really fit in anywhere. No, not true. Not only that, as we touched on before, we went through the book of Daniel. Even the prophecy that Daniel had about the future, a lot of his visions dealt with the history of what happened in the Maccabees. When you read through it, like the 11th chapter in particular, and even going back to the 8th chapter, you'll see that the events that he saw in the vision pertain to the rise of the Greeks after the Persians, and then the conflict they would have with us during the time of their reign, which is detailed more specifically in the books of the Maccabees. Both the Old and New Testament validate the Maccabees as being legitimate history of our people. And the events that took place are worthy to be studied and to observe and to be observed, notwithstanding this feast of dedication that's coming up. Come, so prove all things, right? See, that's St. John 10:22 and 23. Like I said, just good to read and good to show folks as far as why you keep Hanukkah or the Feast of Dedication when they may ask questions about it. Well, why do you keep that? Because most of the Christian churches don't deal with Hanukkah like that, or the other holy days for that matter, right?
So how you show that? You said that's part of that the Bible was part of the Bible according to verse 23. You said
22 and 23. I just read 23 to show that even Christ was there keeping it, observing it.
Okay, feast of dedication. Okay.
Right.
And we just read about it in Maccabees.
No, we didn't just. We're going to read about it
Right.
when we go into the holy day.
Okay.
Right.
But it's mentioned feast of dedication.
Right.
Okay.
So just supporting what we always quote in John 7:38. He that believeth on me, as the scripture has said, so that people don't look at you sideways like you're keeping a Hanukkah when you say you're a Christian. Because people in the world, they'll say, "Oh, you're Jewish," right? You're keeping Hanukkah. Oh, you're Jewish, right? I'm Christian. I'm following Christ. Look, here it is in the gospel, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your comeback. All right. So with that, we'll say Ashar Shabbat. Definitely take note of those dates we just mentioned. And we'll be speaking to everyone soon, either directly or through live stream or through text message, to keep you guys abreast of what's to come in this Gregorian month of December. But like I said, just remember those dates of the 11th and the 18th. But then also, yeah. So also remember, always we always observe the feast of dedication. Also remember too that the new moon always comes within the feast of dedication as well. So I forgot to mention that, which the new moon should be, I think, the 17th, or the end of the closing of the feast of dedication, which I think the 17th is a Sunday. I have it in my calendar here. Let me just verify that for you. Right. So Sunday the 17th of December is going to be the 10th new moon. So that's going to be that Sunday night. So we'll keep that new moon Sunday night, and then the 18th we'll keep the closing for the feast of dedication. So the 11th, which is Monday night, going into Tuesday, Monday night to Tuesday night and even. That'll be the opening. Then we'll have the new moon, which is Sunday night to Monday night, the 17th to the 18th. Monday night to Tuesday night, that'll be the closing Sabbath of the feast dedication, which will be the 18th of December. The 18th going into the 19th. But if you got the email with the high holy days, you'll see those dates on that sheet. If you didn't get it, it's okay. I'll just forward it to you. So the new moon calendar and the high holy day calendar already reflect these dates. I just want to put them out there as a reminder so that you're ready. Okay, so once again, we'll say Ashar Shabbat. Hope everybody was edified with these closing chapters of Maccabees, kind of closing that history of mainly the focus being on that second generation. And Mattathias started it. Yeah, Judas and his brethren were kind of the main bulk of it, and then also Simon and his two sons. And his son, in particular, John, that carried on that righteous tradition going forward. Those are the most noteworthy members of that Hasmonean dynasty that followed the Most High in truth. They said if you go after them, they started to teeter off a little bit. Mixed the Most High stuff with stuff made with man, and didn't maintain that same zealousness like I had before. Because if you think about it, they could continue that on that way or that path, Simon going after him. Who's to say, what would have came of the Roman Empire had we, stayed true to the Most High and didn't have any more deception with the priesthood going forward. But all things happen on the Most High's time, and it's all based on His will ultimately, but it's also the choice that we make. Yeah, you go back. And also based on the choice that we make, because He'll bring down judgment upon us for good or for bad based on the choices that we make and what the heathens make. It's always been that way throughout history.
Yeah.
So once again, Shah Shabbat, and definitely get ready for the closing prayers. And we'll talking to you this upcoming week for the class. Someone close the blinds, Brother Bashir. That's okay. He had no idea. Yeah. Yes, other folks, put your phone on vibrate because folks or mute because
That's how I heard it.
they'll it's a weird thing. It always happens like clockwork. Like when you do the prayers, I'm gonna call you right then and there. And at that same time, like I said, they had no idea. But it's just the timing is kind of interesting like that. You're not the only one. Barakataya Hawa by Shimi Hawashai, Shiral Nanal Pari Agapim Thuada Aman. Like, how about Shimi Hawashai of Yashra? Amadwa, Panyawa Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh Bashan Yahushai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawe, I fed. You guys can speak up if you want. I fed, Yum, I fed, Shalak, Mike Allah, Walla Allahayim, Tazwadakim, La Shema Ayah, Barak, Rapha, Magan, Wa Chazayak, Banye, Yashala, Washalak, Lanawa, Rabian, Kakamad, Rabian, Da'ai, Rabian, Bayanad, Rabian, Sabalanwa, Rabian, Mama One, Rabian, Aqua, Rabian, Mahabian, Rabian, Haganad, Rachanaya, Wasalak, Kau, Katayam Nawa, La Akim, Boyash Aleph, Yad, Waiwalam, Basham, Yehoshai, Amen. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh Basham, Yahweh Shai, Barak Naweh, Wayash Ale, Wabak Yasaparim, Shema, Yashirale, Yahweh, Allahai Naweh, Yahweh, okay. English translation, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. With that, we'll say a Shar Shabbat yet again. Happy Sabbath day. Definitely enjoy the rest of your Sabbath and this upcoming week, and we'll be speaking to you soon as we get ready for the Feast of Dedication that's coming up pretty soon. So shalom and keep in touch.